On a freezing winter night, a struggling restaurant owner unlocked his doors for a weary grandmother and her young grandson, never knowing that this one act of kindness would spark a chain of events that would change their lives forever, turning despair into hope and strangers into family. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The night pressed hard against the windows of Reed's Corner Kitchen. A thin neon sign buzzed above the door, its light flickering like a tired heartbeat. Inside, Malcolm Reed sat at a small table covered in papers. Past due notices, red totals, quiet threats. He moved the envelopes around like pieces on a board he could no longer win. His father's old chef knife rested beside the stack, a reminder of the days when the dining room was full and the kitchen sang with life. Malcolm rubbed his eyes and listened to the empty room breathe. The heater coughed, a fan clicked. The soft hum of the refrigerator carried a rhythm that made the silence feel even heavier. Winter had been unkind. New chain restaurants crowded the avenue. Regulars had moved, retired, or simply stopped coming. He whispered to the dark, saying he was sorry, though no one was there to hear it. He felt like a man guarding a lighthouse no ship could see. He stood, locked the register, and shut down the lights in the dining area. Snow began to fall outside, drawing thin lines across the glass. He pulled on his coat and stepped into the cold. The city felt distant, the streetlights blurry in the wind. He reached to turn the sign off, then paused. For a single breath, the sign stayed on, as if it still believed. Across the street, two figures huddled in a doorway. A small boy pressed into the side of an older woman. Their blanket was thin, the color of old cardboard. The woman held it tight, shifting to shield the child from the wind. Malcolm watched them for a moment, feeling something pull inside his chest. He knew that sharp edge of worry. He knew the taste of fear when it sits in the throat and refuses to melt. The boy's voice carried across the quiet street. He said he was cold. Just that. 3 plain words. Malcolm glanced back at the dark restaurant, at the 4 burners that still worked, at the stack of bowls on the prep table. Then he stepped off the curb and crossed toward them, his boots grinding the thin ice that had formed along the gutter. He kept his voice steady and kind. He told them he owned the little place across the road. He said the kitchen was closed, but the heat was on, and there was soup he could warm quickly. He invited them to come in, to warm their hands and rest their feet. The woman lifted her chin. She was careful, protective. Her eyes showed she was used to saying no. She thanked him and said they would be fine. The boy looked up then, his breath showing in little clouds. He asked softly if they could go inside, just for a minute. The woman's shoulders lowered. She nodded once. Malcolm offered his arm in a simple gesture and led them back across the street. When he unlocked the door, warm air rushed out to meet them. Inside, the restaurant felt different. Not busy, not loud, but alive again, as if it had been waiting for guests. Malcolm motioned to a booth near the heater. He found 2 old blankets in the back and draped them over their shoulders. He moved into the kitchen and worked without thinking. Onions met warm butter. Broth began to steam. The smell of rosemary and garlic spread quick and comforting, like a good memory. The sound of the spoon against the pot was steady, and with each turn, he felt his chest loosen. He carried 2 bowls to the table. The boy gripped his spoon with both hands and took the first sip too fast. He laughed at himself and tried again, slower this time. The woman tasted the soup and closed her eyes, as if the heat was reaching places the blanket could not. She said it was good. Not fancy, just good. Malcolm leaned against the counter and watched them eat, and the still room felt less like a burden and more like a promise. When the bowls were empty, he cleared the table and stood there unsure of what came next. Outside, the snow thickened. The woman turned to the boy and asked if he was warmer now. He smiled the small, careful smile children make when they want to be brave. Malcolm looked toward the hallway. He said there was a small storage room behind the kitchen, with an old couch and a few blankets. It was not much, but the heat held well there. He told them they could rest for the night. No questions, no charge. The woman hesitated. Pride and worry crossed her face like shadows. Then she nodded again, slower this time, and thanked him. The boy whispered a shy thank you as well, and Malcolm felt something shift in the air. The way it does right before dawn when the sky is still black, but the birds start to believe. He guided them to the back and set out 2 extra blankets. He told them the restroom was just down the hall and that he would be in the front if they needed anything. He returned to the dining room and sat where he could see the door. He listened to the building settle. He watched snow drift along the sidewalk. He thought of his father's hands teaching him how to slice an onion thin enough to melt, of customers laughing in that same corner booth, of late nights when the kitchen heat felt like sunshine in winter. His phone buzzed with a reminder about bills due. He silenced it. The numbers had not changed. The threats had not vanished, but the room felt warmer, and he felt less alone inside it. The night that had started with despair now held a small, steady light. As the heater hummed and the last streetcar rattled by, Malcolm looked toward the hallway where his guests were resting. He did not know their story. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. He only knew that kindness had opened the door, and that some doors, once opened, have a way of changing everything. This is where the real-life story begins, with a simple act of kindness on a winter night, and a question that keeps the heart awake. What happens next when compassion takes the lead? Morning sunlight crept through the tall windows of Reed's corner kitchen, spreading pale stripes across the floor. Malcolm Reed pushed open the front door, expecting to find the same mess of bills, dishes, and dust he had left the night before. Instead, he froze. The tables were neatly arranged, each chair tucked in as if waiting for customers. The counters gleamed. The floor looked freshly scrubbed, the scent of soap mixing with the faint smell of last night's soup. He set his keys down slowly, not trusting his own eyes. His gaze moved toward the back hallway, where he had left Rosa and her grandson, Liam, to sleep. Faint rustling came from behind the storage room door. Malcolm stepped closer, his boots making soft sounds on the clean floor. When he opened the door, he saw Rosa kneeling on the floor, folding a pile of rags. Liam sat nearby on a stool, his small hands clutching a sheet of paper. The boy's face lit up when he saw Malcolm. He held the paper out with pride. "Look what I made," he said. Malcolm took the drawing carefully. It showed Reed's corner kitchen, but not as it was. In Liam's sketch, the place was alive with smiling people, bright lights shining through the windows, plates of food on every table. Above the door, the sign read, "Reed's Kitchen," written in uneven but hopeful letters. Malcolm felt his throat tighten. He glanced at Rosa, who met his eyes with a steady, quiet look. "If we're staying here," she said, "we should help." Her voice carried both gratitude and dignity. Malcolm nodded, unsure how to answer, but the warmth in his chest was undeniable. Before he could speak, a sharp knock rattled the front door. Malcolm turned quickly. Standing outside was Mr. Harrison, the landlord. His dark coat collar was pulled high, his breath fogging the glass. Malcolm opened the door, bracing himself. Harrison stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the spotless room with mild surprise. Then, his expression hardened. "You've got 2 weeks, Reed," he said, his tone flat. 2 weeks to pay what you owe. After that, this place is no longer yours." His words cut through the air like cold wind. Malcolm clenched his jaw but said nothing. Silence felt safer than admitting what he already knew, that the money was impossible to gather in so little time. Harrison tapped the counter once with his gloved hand before leaving. The sound echoed long after the door shut. Rosa had come to the doorway during the exchange. Her sharp eyes studied Malcolm, noticing the way his hands trembled as he reached for a towel to busy himself. She said nothing, but her silence carried an understanding that made his shoulders heavier. Liam climbed down from his stool, holding the drawing close. "We can fix it," he said, his voice hopeful. "People will come again." Malcolm crouched, meeting the boy's gaze. "Maybe," he answered, though the word felt fragile in his mouth. Still, Liam's faith sparked something that even Harrison's threat could not crush. The rest of the day passed with small motions of life returning. Rosa swept the floor again, humming under her breath. Malcolm organized supplies in the kitchen, forcing himself to believe there was a reason to keep the burners ready. Liam wandered between them, sometimes quiet, sometimes asking questions about the old photos on the wall, sometimes sketching more pictures of the restaurant alive and full. That evening, Malcolm prepared a simple meal. He set 3 bowls on the table, one for each of them. As they ate, the conversation turned gentle. Rosa spoke of her love for cooking, how she had once made Sunday dinners for her children. Her voice faltered at times, but she never complained about her present hardship. Liam talked about school, the way he missed it, and how he wished he had friends again. Malcolm listened, realizing how long it had been since the restaurant had heard voices that weren't his own. After dinner, Malcolm sat alone at the counter, staring at the boy's drawing pinned under a salt shaker. The paper showed more than a picture. It showed possibility. Outside, the snow fell heavier, but inside, the air felt lighter. Rosa approached quietly, setting a folded dish towel beside him. "You gave us a roof," she said softly. "The least we can do is give back." Her words carried weight, not of obligation, but of partnership. Malcolm nodded again, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. As night settled, he checked the locks and dimmed the lights. Liam curled under blankets in the storage room, clutching his drawing like a treasure. Rosa rested nearby, her breathing steady. Malcolm lingered at the front, staring at the neon sign buzzing faintly in the dark. The debt, the risk, the threat of losing everything still loomed. But there was something new as well. Fragile bonds forming in the quiet, ties that made him feel less alone. That night, Malcolm realized the restaurant was no longer just walls and tables. It was becoming something more, something alive again. And though the future was uncertain, for the first time in months, he believed there might be a reason to keep fighting. The cold days of winter pressed on, and Malcolm Reed felt the weight of time slipping through his fingers. Mr. Harrison's warning echoed in his mind every morning. 2 weeks, 14 days to find money he did not have. Still, he woke early, unlocked Reed's corner kitchen, and lit the burners. Though the dining room stayed mostly empty, something inside him refused to let the fire die. Rosa noticed his determination. She watched as he prepared soups and bread, even when customers were scarce. One morning, as she folded napkins at a table, she asked quietly, "Why do you keep cooking when no one comes?" Malcolm wiped his hands on a towel and looked at the pots. "Because food can bring people back," he said. "But if they won't come in, maybe I should go out to them." The idea seemed impossible, yet by the next day, Malcolm was on the sidewalk with a small table, steam rising from cups of stew. Rosa stood beside him, her scarf pulled tight against the wind. Liam handed out slices of bread with a shy smile that charmed passers-by. At first, people hurried past. The city was fast, and strangers rarely stopped. But then an older man paused, curious about the smell. He tried a spoonful, nodded, and told 2 women nearby to come taste. Slowly, a handful of neighbors gathered. They ate, asked questions, and some even stepped inside the restaurant to sit down. For a brief moment, Malcolm felt hope spark. Maybe Reed's Corner kitchen could come alive again. But reality pressed hard. Free food could not pay bills. By the time he cleaned the kitchen that night, his supplies were nearly gone. He knew he had traded what little he had for a chance, and chance alone would not cover his debts. Days passed, and then the blow came harder. Liam grew sick. His cough deepened, his cheeks pale. Rosa tried to comfort him, but Malcolm knew the signs. The boy needed more than warmth and blankets. He needed a doctor. Malcolm stood at the counter with his thin envelope of cash. It was the last of his savings, set aside for rent. He stared at it, torn between the future of the restaurant and the fragile life of the boy sleeping in the back room. Finally, he closed his fist around the money and whispered, "He comes first," at the hospital. The doctor confirmed pneumonia. Liam would need medicine, rest, and several days under care. Malcolm handed over the cash without hesitation. He felt the final threads of his business unravel, but he could not regret the choice. Watching Liam's chest rise and fall more easily under the doctor's care mattered more than any stack of bills. Rosa sat beside Malcolm in the waiting room. Her hands trembled as she held a worn purse on her lap. After a long silence, she spoke. "You gave everything for him. You risked what little you had left to keep him alive." Her voice broke, but her eyes were steady. "I cannot let you carry this alone." She opened the purse and pulled out a small envelope bound with a faded ribbon. Inside were stacks of bills, carefully folded. Malcolm stared, stunned. "What is this?" he asked. Rosa took a deep breath. "It's what I have been holding for years. After my daughter died in a car accident, I received settlement money. I told myself it was for Liam's future, his schooling, a better home, something more than the streets. But I see now that his future is not somewhere far away. It is here, with you, with this restaurant, with the life we are building together." Malcolm shook his head. "I can't take that. It's yours, it's his." But Rosa reached for his hand, her grip firm. "Listen to me," she said. "Liam sees you as the father he never had. I see you as a man who gave up everything to save him. What good is money sitting in a purse when we can use it to protect what matters right now? This place, this bond, this chance at family. It is worth more than paper." Malcolm looked at her, words caught in his throat. He remembered the boy's drawing of the restaurant glowing with life. He remembered the laughter at the table when they ate together, the warmth that had returned to a space once silent. In that moment, he realized Rosa was right. The money was not just currency. It was a sacrifice, a gift meant to keep hope alive. It was the bridge between despair and renewal. As night settled over the city, Malcolm sat by Liam's hospital bed. The boy stirred, opening his eyes just enough to whisper, "You stayed." Malcolm touched his shoulder gently. "Of course," he said. "That's what family does." Rosa sat quietly on the other side of the bed, tears slipping down her cheeks. She whispered, "Then we are family now." The hospital room filled with a silence that was no longer heavy, but full of promise. Malcolm knew the road ahead would not be easy. Debts still lingered, and struggles waited outside. But he also knew they would not face it alone. Sacrifice had bound them together. Revelation had shown them what truly mattered. Reed's Corner Kitchen was no longer just his burden. It was their shared dream, and together they would fight to keep it alive. The first signs of change began quietly inside Reed's Corner Kitchen. After days at the hospital, Malcolm Reed returned with Rosa and Liam. The boy was weak but recovering, his steps unsteady yet determined. The restaurant looked the same from the outside, but inside something had shifted. It no longer felt like a place fading away. It felt like a space waiting for a second chance. Rosa moved with purpose. She cleaned upstairs rooms that had been storage for years, transforming them into warm spaces. She borrowed furniture from neighbors, hung curtains she sewed from old tablecloths, and made the upstairs into a true home. Liam, though tired, gave instructions from a chair near the counter, pointing out where flowers should sit and where his new drawings should hang. Malcolm watched all this with quiet awe. For months, he had seen only failure in these walls, but Rosa and Liam filled them with life again. Neighbors began to notice, too. Word spread that the old restaurant had not only reopened, but had become something more. People were curious, and curiosity brought them to the door. Mr. Harrison returned one afternoon with his usual sharp tone, demanding money. Before Malcolm could speak, Rosa stepped forward. She carried the envelope of savings she had revealed at the hospital. Her voice did not shake as she placed it on the counter and told him the debt was cleared. Harrison counted the money, looked at her, then at Malcolm. His smirk faded into something closer to respect. "You've bought yourselves a future," he said before leaving. The moment the door closed, Malcolm sank into a chair. He stared at Rosa, still stunned by her sacrifice. "That was everything you had," he whispered. Rosa met his eyes calmly. "No," she said. "All we truly have is each other. The money was only paper. This," she gestured around the room, to Liam's laughter and the clean tables. "This is what matters now." With the debts gone, the kitchen began to flourish. Regulars returned, bringing new customers with them. College students filled tables in the evenings. Construction workers stopped by for lunch. Single mothers found comfort in affordable meals. And on Saturday mornings, Malcolm opened the doors to anyone who needed food, no questions asked. The restaurant transformed into more than a business. It became a community space. Rosa managed the books with careful skill, stretching every dollar. She set up a corner where neighbors posted job offers and housing opportunities. Children gathered by the windows to do homework, while Liam shared his crayons and stories. The walls filled with drawings, thank you notes, and photographs of smiling faces. Malcolm often worked late, but it was no longer the lonely silence he once knew. Now the hum of the restaurant was full of life. One night, as he wiped down the counter, he paused to look at a new drawing Liam had made. It showed the three of them standing in front of Reed's Corner kitchen, surrounded by customers. Above the door, in uneven letters, were the words, "Our family table." Malcolm pinned the drawing on the wall and stood back, his chest heavy with emotion. The restaurant was no longer just his father's dream or his own burden. It had become something greater. It was a place where love was served with every meal, where strangers became family, and where hope was never turned away at the door. Christmas came, and the restaurant opened to everyone who had nowhere else to go. The dining room filled with laughter, shared stories, and plates of warm food. For the first time in years, Rosa said she did not feel alone during the holidays. Liam's smile was wide and bright, his voice carrying across the room as he greeted each guest. Later that night, after the last dish was washed and the chairs stacked, Malcolm sat by the window. The neon sign outside glowed steadily, no longer flickering. He thought of the cold night when he had first seen Rosa and Liam huddled in the street. A single act of kindness had brought them inside. Now, they had given him something far greater in return, a family and a purpose. As he looked at the room filled with drawings, photos, and the echoes of joy, he whispered to himself, "This is what success means. Not money, not awards, but lives touched, hearts warmed, hope restored." Reed's Corner Kitchen had become more than a restaurant. It was a home reborn, where every meal carried the taste of belonging, and every person who walked through the door found proof that kindness still had the power to change the world. And so, Reed's Corner Kitchen was no longer just a place to eat, but a home where kindness fed more than hunger. It fed the soul. Remember, every act of compassion has the power to rewrite a life. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.